Roommate wanted, female only. This is a popular story with my family and most of my friends. Amanda is my brother's girlfriend. At the time of this story, she was looking for a first apartment and moving out from her parents' house. Her and my brother didn't want to move in together since they had only dated for a few months. She opted instead to search for a roommate online. Browsing Craigslist, she found an ad titled something like, "Roommate wanted, females only." This sort of thing was common since the area she was looking in was mostly young professionals. The listing was for a room in a house for about $225 a month, which was quite cheap compared to the most places listed. The occupant listed herself as a 23-year-old college student that wasn't comfortable with living with any males. The other roommate would have their own room and attached bathroom. So far, Amanda was into this place. However, the listing only had a single photo from outside the property. Amanda sent an email wanting to meet the occupant and tour the house. Within 30 minutes, she receives an email back with all the details and time to stop by. The girl worked late hours and wanted Amanda to stop by at 8 p.m. When Amanda arrives, there is a handwritten note on the front door saying, "Door broken, use back door." Walking around the house, it looks nice but slightly unkempt, tall grass, weeds, dusty windows, etc. Still no alarms for Amanda though. When she knocks on the back door and an older man opens the door. At first Amanda thinks she has the wrong house, but the man reassures her and says that the occupant, I forget the name, was out and he was the landlord. The occupant asked him to meet Amanda since she was working late. He seemed pleasant and offered to show her around. Alarms start going off but aren't at red alert yet. First, the guy was clearly in his 40s, unshaven, and looked like he lived in his car. Also, only the kitchen light was on. As they walked around the house, Amanda noticed one huge red flag: no furniture. Nothing. The landlord was polite about answering questions but seemed irritable to keeping lights on for too long, rushing her around and only letting her look at rooms for a few moments. There was a single room that the landlord wouldn't open, telling her that it was the occupant's room and he didn't want to invade her privacy. As they walk down the hallway into the living room, she notices the front door has a plank nailed across it. Broken for sure, Amanda's creepometer is started to ding, so she decides to wrap up the walkthrough and leave, but trying to polite. As she's giving the guy her "thanks for the showing" bit, he perks up and states that he forgot to show her the basement. It's recently furnished and would be a great rec room, and she should take a look down there. At the time, Amanda and the landlord are standing in the small hallway between the front living room and the back kitchen. In this little hallway was the basement door. When he opens the door, it opens outward to create something of a barrier between Amanda and the back door. The basement is pitch black. He smiles, motions down the stairs, and says, "Ladies first." What happens next is nothing more than a stroke of luck. Amanda gets a text just as some random person parks in front of the house. Thinking on her feet, she pretends it's a phone call and answers her phone. "Hey. Yeah, are you here? I'll come out from around back and let you in. It's great, you have to see it." With a motion of confidence, she excuses herself around the landlord and walks out of the back door. She says the guy just looked at her like he was confused. Once outside, she sprinted to her car and sped like hell out of there. When Amanda got home, she told her mother and my brother everything. Cops were called, they took her statement, and went to investigate. The Craigslist post had been removed. Epilogue: the house had been foreclosed over 6 months earlier and the property had been abandoned. When the police investigated, they found that the closed room the landlord didn't want her to look in was where the men had been staying. There was a pile of old dirty blankets, rotten food, and empty gallon jugs everywhere. More creepy was he had plastered ripped up pages from porno mags on all the walls in the room. Where do they even find porno mags? The really scary part of this was the basement. The men had tied a thin piece of fishing twine at about shin level across the stairs about halfway down. The basement was empty except another pile of old blankets, a broom handle wrapped in leather belts, and a small box with a few rolls of assorted tape, duct, electric, etc. Amanda ended up not moving in. Roommate from hell: never move in with a man or woman you've never personally known. I got a roommate from hell this way. the men tortured me psychologically when I turned his sexual advances down, then stole thousands of dollars from me over time, even used my Amazon account to open up an account. He got some of my personal info like social etc. as well. Once I left after calling the cops to help me leave, he showed up at the Apple store I was at just a day after I left. Even though I left to go live on the streets, no family or friends as I was severely abused as a kid, I've been on my own since 14 actually, so I'm accustomed to surviving on the streets for periods of time. I was a million times happier than I ever was in his nice apartment surrounded by nice things and a fancy car. I felt so relieved even just living in a concrete garage. I was a million times happier sleeping on concrete with a pillow made of a towel, a tiny little blanket in the cold and heat than I ever was living there with him. He spent his time psychologically torturing me. I don't regret leaving at all. He would bang on the wall across from mine every morning and late at night to startle me awake. He'd throw pebbles or tap on my window in the middle of the night to scare me, keep me on edge. He'd give me weird little candies and teddy bears as if we were dating, even ordered stalkerish love items from my own Amazon account. Who TF spends this much on a Christmas ornament that says I'll always love and follow you or something along those lines? Yikes, if I'd go to the restroom he'd run and kick his foot at the door so loud and suddenly that it sounded like a door being kicked down. He'd steal my items if I left them alone for even a second, so I'd have no way to go out if I had plans. Then he'd put them back once I mentioned them or when it was too late for me to leave for my plans. He kept me home this way. If I got any mail or a package he'd interrogate me. What did you order? I need to know, like he owned me or something. Towards the end I was leaning doors and furniture up against the door because he picked my bedroom lock before while I was gone, and when I'd wake up sometimes there was stuff missing or moved in odd ways, so I knew he was creeping around while I was asleep. He was an absolute freak. I wouldn't put anything past him since he showed me how psychotic he was. If I was happy or in a good mood he'd start criticizing and nitpicking at my body, hair, face, behavior, voice etc. anything he thought I was insecure about. I even developed an ED because he always did this and mocked/laughed at me when I would make or eat food. Anytime I'd leave my bedroom he would rush out of his room to stand right behind or near me like a weird little dog that follows you around panting. He'd even piss in my hair products, skincare products, vitamins etc. He'd throw out food I just bought, steal my cash, even use my debit cards. He even ordered 30 to 40 items off my Amazon account without my knowledge or consent. It was the strangest thing. If anyone else had dealt with this they'd go insane. I still have trouble believing this stuff happened, as it was just so crazy to even think that someone is that crazy to do this. My roommate didn't stop staring. Obligatory happened in college to start. My sophomore year I lived in the dorms and was assigned a random roommate. He seemed a little bit introverted but fairly normal at first, but he wouldn't really talk to me. I would try to start conversations about things he showed interest in, but he would only give me one-word answers that were obviously meant to end the conversation. I figured he probably just didn't like me, so I decided I would give him some space and leave him alone. After a few days it started. I would notice that he was always looking in my direction. I chalked it up to coincidence, but it kept happening. Classes started up and I spent less and less time in the room, but whenever I was in there he would be constantly looking in my direction. When I would turn to face him he would turn his head away, but it would creep me out since it was pretty much constant. I started noticing he would lay on his bed to read, but he would hold the book or papers at an angle that always gave him a direct line of sight to me. About a week or so into the semester, my GF at the time and I went on a morning hike and crashed on my bed at around 2 p.m. We woke up to him just standing there staring at us about 2 hours later. He didn't say anything, just turned and left the room. At that point I decided I needed to leave before he murdered me in my sleep and ate my face, and I was out of there pretty quickly. Fortunately I didn't see him again for quite a while, but we ended up having a class together senior year. I had been telling my friends the story ever since it happened and they didn't believe me. One of my friends had really poor vision, so we sat in the front row. Of course, every time I looked behind me my old roommate was staring directly at me. Not the teacher, but at me. It didn't matter if we were on the middle or on one of the sides. I challenged them to look back a single time during the semester and catch him not looking at me. Within 5 classes they gave up and agreed that he was staring at me non-stop and he was super creepy. My parents think he was in love with me, but I still think he wanted to murder me in my sleep and eat my face.